Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the second season of Reflections of a Slightly Conscious Being. I'm Sandra Lourenco, a music artist that is on a journey towards consciousness. I am not a licensed psychologist, therapist, or coach. All information I share here comes from personal experience and doesn't mean to replace any kind of professional help. This week, we have 2 planets going retrograde and a new moon coming on Saturday. So according to astrology, retrograde planets or a moon minimizing in our skies mean a period of difficulties or things slowing down. But you don't have to believe in astrology to agree that we all have periods in our lives when things just don't work out as expected, right? We drop or break stuff, we have accidents, we hear the word no more often, and it usually comes all together, right? It's just like a streak of bad luck. Thing is, when we enter a streak of bad luck, it's hard to come out.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Have you ever wondered why that happens? I mentioned several times before that our brains are very powerful. They not only control our body, but they also influence the reality we experiment through our actions and our interaction with that reality. But what controls our brain? Well, you control your brain. But how can you control it fully? Well, actually using your attention and focus. Most of us do things in automatic pilot, and this is what I call unconscious, being unconscious, or the unconscious mode. When we are in unconscious mode, we fall victims of our programmed and conditioned behaviors. This means that when we're not paying attention, we are giving out control to our egos, our automatic pilots, our conditioned patterns. But does this mean that you're not responsible for your actions? Of course, you're still responsible, right?
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Truth is, most accidents happen because someone wasn't paying attention. I'm not saying people have accidents on purpose, okay? I'm just saying some people do have a harder time paying attention or remaining conscious. Being present takes practice, for sure. But some of us are just more naturally inclined to remain present, even without practice. It's just like, some of us have more natural, are better at a specific thing, right? Or being, in my case, singing. I was always inclined to sing. And then, of course, I practice singing a lot more often than other people. And that's why I am a good singer today, right? But I also had a natural inclination to sing. And I have a naturally good ear to catch melodies and all of that. So it's 2 components, right? It's definitely it starts with the natural inclination. But then it's also about practicing and, trying a bit every day. Being present and remaining conscious and paying attention, giving our full attention to what we're doing, is also a matter of practice, all right? The more accidents someone has, the more they start believing that they're clumsy, right? So usually people who are in a bad luck streak, they start thinking that they are unlucky. So it starts becoming a belief, all right? And the more people believe that they're clumsy, for example, and that there's nothing they can do about it because, they're just clumsy, the more clumsy they become. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. And of course, they will have more accidents because they believe that's the way they are, right? Does this make sense? Same logic applies to bad luck streaks, right? If you believe you're on a bad luck streak, you'll have a more natural tendency to have bad luck because you'll be expecting it. Not only that, but you will also pay more attention to things considered unlucky or negative. And so you'll notice things that perhaps you wouldn't even notice if you weren't already with the bad luck belief, with the bad luck sunglasses in your mind. So you see reality through these bad luck lenses and these negative lenses. And so you will naturally pay more attention to things considered negative, right? So this explains, and that's why I started mentioning astrology. This explains why people who believe in astrology, they swear by it. They even plan their lives considering everything that astrology says. But people who don't believe in astrology or don't follow the astrological events, they mostly get unaffected by it. So think about it. If you believe in this stuff and you read somewhere that, for example, today will be a bad day astrologically speaking, wouldn't you feel a naturally tendency to feel dread and start expecting bad things to happen? So the more you believe this, the more your brain will make it real, and the more your brain will pay attention to the bad things.
I thought it wasn't real. Your mind makes it real.
Remember, similar experiences can be experienced very differently by different people, because we all have our slides. We all have our sunglasses, our lenses, our filters through which we filter the reality we assimilate, that our brains assimilate, right? I've come to understand that even labeling one experience as positive or negative, it's all about perspective. There are no absolutes in nature.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Every situation has its pros and cons. And we have a saying here in Portugal, sometimes bad things happen for good reasons. And I absolutely love that saying. Many times in my life, I had what seemed in the moment to be a bad experience, but then later, and looking back now with different perspective in the great context of things, they actually turned out to be good experiences. One great example of that is Viktor Frankl. He's an author. He has a book. He wrote this book while he was prisoner in several concentration camps during World War II. So he's a psychiatrist. And during his most horrific experience in his life, something good came out of it. What he noticed, his whole work, and he created a whole new branch in psychology and psychiatry and therapy. He noticed that the people who had more resilience and were able to survive these extreme experiences were the people who managed to remain optimist, and they had a meaning. They had goals for their future. They had a vision of what they wanted to do after everything was over. They had a reason or reasons to stay alive. And for Viktor Frankl, his reason was actually kind of bittersweet, because he took this time to start writing this book. So he took the perspective, okay, I'm here, I'm a psychiatrist. I can take this experience as a witness and try to learn something from it. But that wasn't actually his meaning. He chose to stay alive because he wanted to be there for his family when everything was over. So his family was also in concentration camps, but they were all separated. He didn't know where his family was. And so his meaning, his goal was, I have to stay alive because I want to see my family again, and I don't want my family to mourn me. I want to be there for my family, and I want to live with my family and be reunited with my family when everything is over. That was his meaning, and that was his reason. But during the years that he was on concentration camps, he also started writing what turned out to be the work of his life, and totally revolutionized and created a whole new branch on psychology and psychiatry. And unfortunately, when everything was over, he found out that he was the only one who was alive from his family. So the reason that kept him alive actually turned out to not be real. Actually, there was other reason, and I do feel the reason he survived was that he needed to share his work with the rest of the world. Truth is, he didn't even know what his reason was, but he had a reason. Turned out to, unfortunately, not be true. But anyway, it was what kept him alive. And another reason resurfaced after everything was over. So it's an amazing book. Search the author, Viktor Frankl. He has the same personality as I am. He's an INFJ, if you're a fan of the MBTI system. But he is just a great book and a great perspective. All right. And if you really want to learn more about this team today, that's the book recommendation I have for you. So during many years of my life, and I never experienced anything as hard as Viktor Frankl, but I think we all went through bad times in our life, bad experiences, right? And during many years of my life, I focused on the bad side of things. I focused on the problems. I focused on the difficulties. And back then, all my life seemed so hard from that perspective. I remember even resenting other people because I saw people all around me achieving things so much more easily than I could. And the more I focused on this perspective, the more I believed things were hard for me, and the more I focused on the negative, the more negative things would get, and the more negative I would get as well. Today, for me, it's easy, and taking in consideration everything I said, it's easy for me, and probably for you guys too, to see why that was, right? In my case, it took me some years of personal development to start turning things around by focusing more on the positive. And this doesn't mean to ignore the negative, though. There are many coaches that advocate for you to stay positive and stay happy no matter what. And sometimes that is just impossible, all right? And that's not the case. In my case, I had to learn focusing on the positive at the beginning at a more exaggerate level, because I came from a very negative point of view, all right? And it's something that, again, was passed by my family. My family, my parents, they are very negative people. They see a really harsh and aggressive environment in the world. And so that's what I learned from them. And that's what I carried, the heritage I carried from them. So I had to start practicing to focus a lot more in the positive, even if it was on an exaggerated manner, all right? It's just because I was coming from a very exaggerated negative. So for you to make up for a very exaggerated negative, you have to, at least for a while, go a bit towards a bit more exaggerate positive, all right? And then you start finding the balance in between. Of course, you always have to strive for balance in everything. And life doesn't mean to be fully positive, but also it doesn't have to be fully negative, all right? The balance is somewhere in between. Like I said before, nothing is fully negative or positive. You just don't have access to all information when something happens, and neither you are supposed to. You are not supposed to know why everything happens in your life. Imagine you hit your car, all right? What's positive in that, you may ask? Well, the accident could have been a lot worse, I'm sure. It can always be a lot worse. The accident made you stop going somewhere, or at least delayed you going somewhere. Who knows what may have happened if you didn't have that accident, right? See what I did there? I mean, I put a seemingly bad thing in perspective. The world we live has so many moving parts, right? And sometimes things come together in such improbable ways that it forces us to wonder if there is not a higher plan in action, right? Many times in my life, I felt this. I felt coincidences that were just too big to be random. Carl Jung actually was the first person who noticed this factor, and he even gave it a name. He called these events synchronicities. All right. And one example of a synchronicity is, imagine that you're reading a book about butterflies and a butterfly lands right in your book while you're reading it. So this would be called a synchronicity. Like, what are the odds of this happen? But things like this happen all the time. So you don't have to believe in a higher plan or in synchronicities, though. Okay, this was just a side note. Every action every decision we make carve our own lives, right? This is a fact. If you're focusing on the negative, you'll tend to take bad decisions. You'll tend to attract difficulties because that's where your focus is, all right? And if you're focusing on the positive, things will have a tendency to go easier and smoother for you. But this doesn't mean that you will not have rough times, because even people who are very, very negative have good breaks, right? So it's the same way around. And life is not supposed to be fully positive or fully negative, all right? This just means, and focusing on the positive just means that you'll have a smoother ride, and you, not only that, but you'll also learn to deal with difficulties and seemingly negative things a lot easier, all right? Most important of all, you'll start believing that everything works out in the end. Things have a way to work themselves out, and you'll feel at peace with the world and with yourself. So we have a tendency we want to control every possible outcome, right? But things never go fully according to plan. That's just the way things are. If you are very rigid and if you want to control everything, you will have a tendency to get disappointed when things don't go according to plan. Learn to accept that everything happens for a reason, or that, well, maybe it was better this way, also gives you a better sense of adaptation. It's a lot easier for you to adapt when things like that happen, right? And turn things around because you're focusing on the solution and not on the problem, right? So expectations are formed, and now going back to the all this was a conversation to prepare you to what I'm going to say next, all right? Expectations are formed when we believe things will go a certain way. The more expectations we create, the more we get disappointed, right? Why? Because nothing ever goes exactly as planned. But this doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan to your future and leave things to chance, okay? It just means that anytime something doesn't go according to your plan, you shouldn't immediately label it as negative or bad, all right? Trust in the grand scheme, all right? Don't fight the wave, just go with it. Learn to use it, see where it leads you, and use its momentum the right way, all right? So it's again finding the balance, and surfers will tell you this all the time. The secret to surf is that you use the momentum of the wave to go where you want to go, all right? So it's a balance between the will of the wave and the will of the surfer, all right? They have to be in symphony. There has to be compromise, but you have to compromise a lot more than the wave, because the wave has a lot more power than you, right? But still you can use it. Still you can, and they use it amazingly. I wish I knew how to surf. I don't. But I find it amazing because that's exactly it. It's using the will of the wave, using the will of the ocean to do the things you want to do. But you have to respect its power. The minute you don't respect its power, that's the minute you lose balance and bad things happen. You have to be really careful with the wave, and you have to respect the wave. But this doesn't mean that you have to leave everything up to the wave or leave everything to chance. Truth is, nature is made of cycles, right? We have night and day, we have light and dark, we have expansion and contraction in the case of the moon, right? We have the full moon, and then we have the new moon. We have high tides, we have low tides, we have planets going forward, we have planets going retrograde, we have this kind of back and forth. The human mind tends to categorize the negative as unwanted. Like, it tends to see the opposite to expansion as negative, right? We tend to see action like something positive, and we tend to see being still or being stopped as something negative, something that should be avoided, when it is in fact unavoidable and even necessary, right? Muscle, this is a good example. Muscle doesn't grow when you're exercising. It actually grows when you're resting after having exercised. And people who always had a lot of money, for example, people who only experienced one side, so people who only experience the positive, like always having a lot of money, they can never appreciate having a lot of money as much as someone who has experienced the other extreme, as something who had experienced poverty, who had experienced lacking of money. It just makes you value money in a totally different way. Life itself couldn't be cherished if there wasn't death, right? So sometimes when a door closes, a window opens, right? That's what they say. What they don't tell you is that sometimes a door stays shut because it wasn't the right door for you, even though at the moment it did seem a good door. Or maybe it just wasn't the right time for you to go through that door. Sometimes we're just not ready. And that's okay too. This is how I deal when things don't go as expected. All right. And this is why, some of you have mentioned that I look happier now. It's not a matter of happiness, I feel. I think it's just a matter of being at peace and accepting things as they are. And I also think that knowing this is what makes me able to turn my life around in really crazy and unexpected ways. And there have been moments in my life that I've I made some drastic changes in my life, even though I'm a person who I can be very steady, but I can also just make really abrupt changes in my life. And I believe this is why. It's just, okay, sometimes I realize, all right, this is not the right way for me. It's okay. It's important to know when to keep going, but it's also as important to know when to give up and when to quit. And some people are just so afraid, right? As they are afraid, they carry on going on a direction that they feel inside is not right for them, but they have already invested too much on that, right? And investment, it's a kind of expectations, and it's kind of expectation. If you are investing today, the most important thing in your life, which is time, it doesn't matter how much you have invested, all right? All it matters is, do you feel it's right for you? Do you enjoy investing time in it? Or are you just investing time because you're expecting something in the future? And there's nothing wrong about expecting things in the future. I do believe we all expect things from the future in a way or in the other. But are you enjoying the present? Are you enjoying the road? Or are you just waiting to get to the destination? Do I still get disappointed? Of course, yes. Yes, of course I do. And I still, because I also still I still have expectations, of course. And as long as we have expectations, we get disappointed sooner or later. But I don't stay there. Usually I stay disappointed, but only for a moment. Then I wake up, I take back control. And if I can do this, so can you. It's all a matter of practice. And one thing I can guarantee, the more you practice this, the easier it gets. And on this moment, usually my very first reaction is to see the good thing in it, in anything that happens. If I can see anything positive in that moment, I trust that, okay, maybe this is for a good reason. It's okay. Maybe now I cannot see anything positive, but I'm sure in a while, after a few days or a few weeks, something positive will come out of this. I expect it. And so it ends up coming in one way or the other. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to comment, all right, if you have doubts or any questions. Don't forget also to like this episode, drop on a like. Don't forget to subscribe my channel. Don't forget to share as well. If you feel that the message that I'm sharing here today makes sense to someone you know, if someone popped up in your head as I was talking, send this episode to that person, all right? Maybe it will be helpful. And don't forget also to comment and all that. And don't forget, if you have suggestions for future teams or questions, whatever, I'm at mail@sandralourenco.pt. See you next week.